Welcome to Manager Tools. This week, the 95% Solution, Part 2. The questions this cast answers are, how can I get more done every week? How can I make time for a project? How can I boost my productivity?
There's a secret about business school. They don't teach you how to be an executive. They teach you hard skills like how to read a P&L, and you get to build an incredible network with people like you who will be useful to you in the future, but you don't learn how to be an executive. There isn't school for executives. Most of them learn as they go by making mistakes. But we have a shortcut for you. It's called Executive Tools, and it's our new podcast that's available only for personal licensees. It's everything we know about how to be an executive in our traditional, this is how to do it style. So don't wait until you're an executive and learn the hard way. Learn now and be a great executive from the moment you're promoted. Go to managertools.com, look for products in the menu bar, and select personal license to find out more.
Executives understand, y'all, that they're just not going to get all their work done. And we talked about this last time, right? We talked about you can't do all of the work. Executives understand this, and managers are really in the same position. You got to think about it, right? Do you get all of your work done every day? I mean, do you, Sarah? Do you leave your desk at the end of the day every day with all of your work done?
Never in none of my jobs ever.
Right. The only time you ever feel like you've gotten everything done is when you're about to go on vacation, right?
Yeah,
Then it's
exactly.
like, okay, I made the list of stuff that has to get done and the stuff that doesn't have to get done, and I've hit that line.
Mm-hmm.
There's always more work to be done. I would argue I don't know anyone who leaves their desk at the end of the day, every day with all of their work done. Time to get comfortable with that, y'all. Time to get comfy with reality. When it's true that not all the work is going to get done, then the logic becomes irrefutable. What are you going to do and what are you not going to do? And y'all, probably the time you are most likely to employ this logic and be comfortable with your employment of this logic is right before you go on vacation. You make choices like this every day.
Mm-hmm.
You grant yourself a level of comfort with the vacation choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something to keep in mind, just because it's a really great way to remind yourself that on a daily basis, what we do instead is we make choices every single day and then illogically assume that somehow, someday in the future, we're going to get it all done.
Mm-hmm.
And that math doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't add up.
No, it doesn't make any sense.
Mm-mm. So what that means then is we need to ask ourselves a question. If it is true by definition that not all of the work can get done, we need to focus on only a portion of that work. Then, what work is most important? We need to decide, when we know we can't get it all done, where we'll focus our efforts. That's the purview of executives and smart managers, is figuring out what those things are, those priorities to focus on, and then by compression or delegation to the floor, minimizing the impacts the other work has on our priorities. So let's leave those most important priorities aside from this discussion for now. Everything else that you do can fall into the less important things. One of those three categories then. Compression, delegation.
Just to be clear, guys, we're not talking about your most important work. You have to do that stuff. I know Sarah already said that, but you have to do your most important stuff, your highest priority.
Yes.
And then it falls into, everything else goes into the three categories.
Exactly. And everything else gets into the three categories. Those priorities, though, we'll talk about those in a bit, but let's talk first about how to minimize the impact of the other things. So let's start with compression.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of compression of our current work, or decreasing the amount of time it takes us to complete, it's actually not that hard. A really simple example is your meetings. Take a look at what you're doing and schedule them for less time. If you have a staff meeting, for example, if currently your staff meeting is on the calendar every single week for 90 minutes, cut it to 60 minutes. Just remove a couple of things off the agenda. I mean, handle a couple of other items a different way through reporting before or after the meeting. And if you think to yourself, oh, no way, I can't do 60, do 75. And then a few months later, try and bring it down to 60.
I would even say in our post-COVID Zoom lives that if you were to stop scheduling your meetings for 60 minutes and start scheduling them for 50, every person on your team would applaud you because they'd have 10 minutes in between meetings. And maybe that doesn't work for the whole compression of work thing too much, although you could put them back to back. But I would almost argue just having like 10 minutes in between to get up and get
Eat
some
food.
Yeah, food. That's a thing.
Yeah, right.
So this compression is going to work for 95% of your meetings.
Yeah.
Not one-on-ones.
Not one-on-ones. And we've tried it. We've tried the compression of one-on-ones before, and it doesn't work. But your other meetings, stop with that 1 hour default. To Kate's point, make them 45. If your team schedules, because you're not in control of all of the meetings put on your calendar, we get that. If your team schedules a 60-minute meeting that you're in, make sure you tell them, communicate to them that they need to front load that agenda so that you can step out after 45 minutes.
Which may teach them what is already really important, which is the most important thing goes on the agenda first, y'all. But that's not what people do. And maybe this will teach them that.
Right. Chances are they're all going to try and get out of there after 45 minutes too.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, she's not here anymore. We might as well call it. And now your meeting is getting done in 45 minutes. And to be clear, now we've just gifted you 15 minutes back in your schedule. You're welcome. Don't waste them.
Mm-hmm.
Don't faff around with your 15 minutes. Schedule the next 30 minutes to work on your priorities. Don't be wasteful of the gift.
Yeah. We're trying to help you. Also, learn how to push meetings you're in to run faster. Your team will catch on. Don't ask, as we mentioned in a recent cast, anything else.
Mm-hmm.
As the line from Moneyball reminds us, when you get the answer you want, hang up the phone. Push those meetings to have an increased sense of urgency. Lead your team in the meeting by quickly closing out items and helping your facilitator. Remember, you've already delegated running your meetings. So push your facilitator and help them to move on to the next item. It's a very executive level behavior. Even the president is always asking his body man, what's next?
Speaking of places to compress in our schedule, another really easy place to compress is email. Stop doing email scattered throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
Don't walk around checking email and reading things and then marking them unread because you just wasted time reading it but have no time to action it right now. So you know you're going to need to go back and reread that email later so that you can action it. It's a bad habit that many of us get into. And let me be clear, if you don't have time to do something once, you certainly don't have time to do everything twice.
Yeah.
Same thing goes with things like, not just to expand this beyond just email communication, is Instant Messenger or Slack. Yes, you could consider instant messaging more urgent than email, but you're a leader in the organization. Urgency is not your only concern. Tell your team, just because sending me an instant message is easy for you, that doesn't make it an urgent matter for me. I'll get to Slack, but if you want to get me and you think there's urgency to that, you're going to need to call me.
Mm-hmm. I was at a client once and we were talking about urgency and email. And I said, you know, the way you know that email isn't urgent is because if the building was on fire, you wouldn't send an email. And somebody in the back of the room said, no, but we do have an emergency Slack channel. So I would Slack it. So the building's on fire and you get a Slack. Y'all, I'm afraid for that group. I'm afraid that they're all going to die a fiery death.
going to perish.
Yeah.
Install fire alarms, please.
I mean, they definitely have them. I just, like a Slack that the building's on fire doesn't really seem like it's going to be super effective. And you have to communicate to your directs that if there's urgency and you want them to get,
You do.
they want to get a hold of you, that phone is the best way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And to go back to processing mail, turn off your mail client, except when you're processing mail, or just don't go into it.
Yeah.
I have the bubble that tells me how many email I have.
hate the bubble.
I turn it off. I don't have a
I
bubble.
turn it off.
I don't have an email bubble.
There's
you know
no
why?
dings, no bubbles.
Also because the purpose of the bubble is to tell me there's email. There's always email. There's literally always email.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't need a bubble because to me, the bubble gives me urgency.
Mm-hmm.
So turn your mail client off except when you're processing mail. Take 20 minutes rather than 30 and do it 3 times a day. There's another 30 minutes you're going to get back. Are you taking too long to respond to your emails? Great. Become more high D. Be more crisp. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always be where you always have been. If you want more, if you want to do better, that means change. Stop worrying about comfort. Focus on productivity and your priorities. And if you haven't heard the email cast, we recommend that you check email first thing in the morning, around lunchtime, and then at the end of the day.
Another thing to be more skeptical about or critical about is all of those requests and demands from staff folks above you. That is, we get these requests from all areas of the organization that we feel as though we're being told that we need to action. We talked about this in a recent cast.
Mm-hmm.
Delegate those things. Delegation of higher level tasks that are coming to you helps your folks learn more about what your job entails. And it's unlikely you're going to get in trouble for not doing them yourself personally or for being a little bit late on it. Use the ability to be late to have your folks learn how to do some of these tasks on your behalf and have this delegation serve as their opportunity to build relationships with some of those other staff folks. I mean, try it every once in a while. Just tell your boss that you're not even going to respond to one of these requests that seems kind of trivial. I betcha she's going to say, yeah, no worries. It's absolutely fine. At the end of the day, guys, know that no one gets promoted because staff people think they're super responsive to all the requests.
Yeah, that's unlikely to get you there. Okay, so desk work that you schedule. Schedule 45 minutes at your desk, not an hour. Push to get through the work. Reward yourself by spending the next half hour or more that you saved that day with this guidance by scheduling time to work on your new priority. And some of you are thinking, well, I don't have that stuff on my calendar, Kate. I'm not scheduling stuff like that.
Okay.
Okay, how are you going to compress something that you're not measuring?
Mm-hmm.
Also, what's on your calendar then? Scheduling time during your day rather than saying as much as I can get done during this window will give you a mini deadline and cause you to focus on that thing. It also reminds you to get it done. I don't know about y'all, but I have multiple moments a day where I get caught up in something and I think to myself, what am I supposed to be doing right now? And I immediately look at my calendar.
Yeah. Constantly.
Yeah. You might have to do this with 2 calendars. Maybe you have a calendar of meetings that people can see, and then you have a calendar of desk work that you're going to get done and that stuff so that people know that that time could be used for a meeting or it's available if something's shuffled around. And you got to schedule this stuff, not only because it represents your priorities, but also because you can't give yourself less time if you don't know how much time you're giving yourself to begin with.
Exactly. I mean, I know myself, Mark, calendars are open all the time.
Yeah.
The calendar is the thing that's always open because it governs our life.
Yeah.
And what that means is if you're thinking to yourself, oh man, though, you don't know my office. So many distractions, Kate. When people pop their head in and ask for a minute, they're not asking for a minute. They're asking for like 10 minutes. But when they do that, pop their head in, hey, do you got a minute? say yes, but not right now. And then say, take a look at my calendar, find 10 minutes, and put it in there. And then when time comes for that 10-minute interaction, hold them to their 10 minutes.
Hopefully, too, by then, because there's a delay, they'll have gotten their thoughts in order where it's not just like a volleyball discussion, like, oh, what
Yeah.
about this? What about this? What about that? Like, if they know they're only going to get 10 minutes of your time, hopefully they've prepared. Because I find that most people who come into your office, hey, do you have a minute? They don't say, the question I have is X, or the purpose of this
Right.
stop by is Y, or I think we should X. They just want to
No.
bat an idea back and forth. And that's not helpful.
Right. We have no idea the level of urgency or how long this conversation might take.
Right.
It's just us availing ourselves to somebody who is exerting pressure on our schedule. So when we're able to, again, push it off, put something on my calendar, have that 10 minutes, that amount of time assigned to tasks, it will reduce the sense of urgency, and they will, as Kate said, come more prepared for the meeting itself. Now, this doesn't cover, though, obviously, those individuals who pop their heads in and say, can I have a minute, while they're sliding into a chair in your office, basically scamming you into stealing that 10 minutes. Now, you can forgive those people with a smile, obviously, but it's your time. Spend it wisely.
We're not trying to not interact. We're just
No.
trying to push it to a time when we're not focused on something else, when it's not a distraction. And I'm not suggesting the distraction is the bad thing. If somebody comes in with something they need to talk about, I don't want to be thinking about something else. And I already am, because I'm at my desk doing something else. And so it's a disservice. And this happens to me because I work in my house. People come into my office and they ask me a question. Specifically, one person comes into my office and asks me a question. And I don't know the answer and can't even think about that thing. I'm so, far away from what is being discussed in context. This will give you the ability to focus on what they're actually asking, what they're actually saying. It's a benefit to them in terms of your ability to focus on what it is that they're talking about. So we're not trying to make them feel like we're not giving them the time they ask for. We are going to give them that time. We just want to make sure everybody's on the same page when we have that discussion.
Absolutely.
Now we're getting back into the office. It's time to think about in-person training for our teams. The Manager Tools team is ready and willing to travel all over the world to bring you our Effective Manager, Effective Communicator, and Effective Hiring conferences. Hiring is going to be a big story for the next 6 to 8 months. There's a lot of people around, but there's a lot of demand as well. And finding the right people is really important. There's nothing worse than the wrong person on your team. So don't let that happen to you. Reach out to us, customer service at manager-tools.com, and Maggie will be happy to talk to you about which member of the Manager Tools team can come and make your team more effective.
Now, the things that we've just gone through, folks, are just a few simple examples. We assure you there's more opportunities for this type of compression in your calendar. So again, we'd suggest you find all of those opportunities for compression, delegation, and work stoppage to avail yourself, to allow yourself the opportunity to focus on, again, your priorities, which should be at the forefront of your thoughts.
So if you work 50 hours a week, all of the things that we've just discussed, we're thinking we can get you back 5%, and that's 2.5 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
I think because in my mind, I dream that this 2.5 hours will be all at the same time, like on a quiet afternoon. Or I used to, when I worked at Orbit, I would come in at like 7 some days, and it would be silent for 2.5 hours of silence where you could just do your work. Doesn't that sound amazing? Now, 2.5 hours is kind of the goal here. You'll probably find more than 2.5 hours each week if you follow all of this guidance. And let's assume it's just the 2.5 hours. That's 5% more time in a 50-hour week. Like magic. And when you think about it, like a 7 a.m. like silent 2.5 hours does sound like magic. If you only work 40 hours a week, it's over 6%. So 5 or 6% of your work week can be stolen back from the time thieves. Assuming you can keep your average productivity at the same level, these are 5 and 6% improvements every single week. Wow. I mean, because y'all, there's probably people listening who are like me where it's like, oh, I used to love 4-day work weeks, which this is. And also last week was a 4-day work week for myself. I had a family thing. And now I despise 4-day work weeks. I honestly don't know how you're supposed to fit 5 days worth of work into 4 hours or into 4 days a week.
4 days.
Yeah. And man, I thought to myself all week, I'm like, I'm just going to have to get up earlier tomorrow. Just keep getting up earlier every single day. And in my household, early doesn't cut into family time. So it's a bit different for myself. Some people getting up early, going to work early does cut into family time. And the rhythm of my household is different. Remember, y'all, as we're talking through this, that if you can get 5 or 6% in the core of your day, rather than by staying 5% later or coming in 5% earlier, you can maintain that family time and still get more work done. And also, it's been our experience that when you ask professionals if you had 5 or 6% more time, what would that be like? They all say, hey, I wouldn't spend that on normal stuff.
Right.
That's like your secret time.
Right.
It's like my special time. And you spend it on special projects, bigger efforts, the things like new initiatives, stuff that you need that would make a big difference that right now you may be, kind of hearing like, oh, we don't really have time for that. I once, and this is really just like tattling on myself, I once did not do a status report for 6 months. And mostly because the first time I missed it, I forgot and nobody noticed. So then I forgot again the second time on purpose and nobody noticed. So then I kept not doing it. It was purposeful then, and used it to work on this idea I had that actually ended up saving us time on our contract. And instead of writing 9 specifications, we only had to write 3. So we saved ourselves 60% of the work involved. And it was because I had this free time, like this unassigned free floating minutes.
Exactly. Now, I guess to elaborate on what Kate just said, those free floating minutes, we don't want them to just free float forever.
No.
That is that new priority.
You're not going to do this and then go play golf.
Yeah, exactly. We want you to put that new priority, those 2.5 hours you've just found back, let's say it's 2.5 hours, and stick them in your calendar. And we've implied this a whole bunch already. But just to be clear, if you have got something that is important, it gets time on your calendar. Period. Everything that's not on your calendar is, by definition, not your priority and therefore not important. The best example that we can think of this, that most of us have for this, is email. Everybody complains about it, except those of us who relegate it to its own little scheduled time and then attack it and kill it in 30 minutes 3 times a day. But everyone else complains about how they're pushed and pulled in all of these random directions by email, which is something that's not on most people's calendars. But those complaints are completely false. I mean, they have no basis for them. Email isn't doing anything to you. You're doing it to yourself. And we can't count the number of managers. I mean, thousands of managers who've told us that, I simply don't think that I could schedule an email check of 30 minutes 3 times a day. Emails are culture here in our organization, they say to us. And then when they put in place this email check 3 times a day, they discover that they actually can do it 3 times a day in scheduled blocks, and nothing bad will happen. And the universe won't implode upon themselves, and the culture of their organization won't come crumbling to the ground.
I would even say, like, for those people who are not putting email on their calendar, somebody says to you, oh, well, you can't check email only 3 times a day. Like, that's not I would say, I do, and I've got it on my calendar. So I actually have time scheduled to do it, whereas everybody else here is just doing it whenever.
Yeah.
So if somebody says, oh, well, did you get my email? It's like, no, dude, if you look at my calendar, I only check email 3 times a day.
Yeah.
That's the times I'm going to see your email.
Mhm.
And somebody says, well, you only check 3 times a day. Like, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to check all the time. It's like, I would say to that person, I have no data to support that you actually are checking it all the time
Ever.
because I don't see it on your calendar.
Yeah, it's not on your calendar.
Right.
Is it important? Then it should be on your calendar.
Yeah. And the reason it's taking over all the time allotted is because you've allotted the whole day
The whole day.
by not putting it on the calendar.
Exactly.
Yeah. So smaller blocks, right?
Smaller blocks. Yeah. I mean, now that we have this, let's stay on the theme, this 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Let's assume that you've found back in your calendar. We'd suggest that you not hoard that time necessarily and put a big 2.5 hour block then on your calendar.
Yeah.
Now, the reason being, in our experience, your attention span, it just won't hold for a full 2.5 hours. And because your attention starts to wane, you feel the want or need to be drawn off onto other things. You start getting tempted to just start doing some work or just poking around in your email, or I'm just going to read my Slacks. Maybe I'll send out a couple of Slacks, things like that, right? And you won't have specific goals for the tasks that you had scheduled yourself to have been completed,
Mm-hmm.
right? You'll have basically, I guess in essence, you'll have earned this 2.5 hours back, and then you'll have used it wastefully.
Yeah.
So we'd suggest instead that if you know your tendency is to do that, is to not be able to focus for extended periods of time on something before getting distracted, we'd encourage you to become a disciple of getting things done. Getting things done, GTD, one of its core tenets is next action, breaking up big things into small things that you can accomplish. And we've talked about this ourselves as well when we talk about when we teach deliverables without "and" in them.
So that 7:30 a.m. dream of the 2.5 hours is not likely to be as successful. It sounds glorious, but it's not like as likely to be successful as, half an hour blocks. And this is something that it took me years to learn, was the value of scheduling yourself for only 30 minutes or 45 and knowing what it is you want to get done in that time.
Mm-hmm.
And think through, these are the 5 things that have to be get done. Can I book, 3 to 5 30-minute blocks in which to do that, and finish the time knowing what your next delineated tasks for when you have more time on your calendar for the priority are. So, make sure that at the end of that 30 or 45-minute block, you spend 2 or 3 minutes putting in your next calendar block, the next 2 things that have to get done. And that's what I always do. I make a first list and then I just move things forward in the 30-minute blocks. So that makes it easier for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in addition, or I guess the next concept we're going to talk about is the fact that mornings are better. Again, we're focusing here on our discussion around the priority items that we need to focus on to accomplish. And every manager, since the beginning of time, it would seem, has fallen prey to the productivity killer of getting swept up in their day, not scheduling time for a larger effort, and then convincing ourselves somehow that I'll do it later in the afternoon when things calm down, when things slow down for the day, right? When people are kind of wrapping things up.
It's a trap.
It's a trap. It's a total trap. At 4 or 5 p.m., when you've relegated this priority task to, your ego strength, the ability for you to make crisp, effective decisions has all but died.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I just literally did this the other day. I had a slide deck that I needed to complete in time for a meeting on Friday. I had time. I did step 1, scheduled time for that priority in my calendar. But I scheduled it at, I think it was 3 p.m.
Oof.
on Monday. Exactly. Do you think I did it at 3 p.m. on
Nope.
Monday? No, I did not. And we've watched videos of managers do the same thing I did on Monday, ineffectively faff around their desks from 4:30 to 6, a circus of inefficiency, getting
Mhm.
nothing effective done. And for many people, in many cases, this time is something that's being stolen from their family, which again, everyone says is their number one priority. They talk to us all the time about how do I achieve work, home life balance? How do I achieve that? And they don't make their family the number one priority. They
Mhm.
schedule these brain activities for the end of the day, and it doesn't work. And Kate mentioned this earlier. I mean, some of us don't even have families at home. Maybe you don't have a family, things like that you need to go home to. You're still brain dead at the end of the day, and we know you are.
Yeah, we are too. I mean,
Yeah.
Also, my motivation to start something at 3 p.m. is 0. I would honestly, y'all, I think, and we've talked about this in a cast, Wendy and I talked about it in a career tools cast. Move your personal admin stuff, like the small stuff, the repetitive stuff that you do all day. Don't get that done first thing on Monday morning. Get it done first, like in the afternoon on Monday. You know how to do it. You don't need help with that. Like, it's not hard.
It's routine.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Get your bigger priorities on your calendar in the morning. You're smarter. It gives you more wiggle room, and you won't spend the whole day worrying about what you have to do later. Right? Eat the frog.
Exactly.
If this all sounds great to you, but you're really busy right now, you could start 5 weeks from now. You don't have to do it right now. Maybe right now isn't good. You're in the middle of something, you got something big going on. But look at your calendar 5 weeks from now. It's empty.
Mhm.
I mean,
Completely.
yeah, it's empty, y'all. Maybe your directs push back on this. You try it and your directs push back on this. Fine. Tell them you're going to do it in 3 to 5 weeks.
They have time to prepare now.
Right. Give them a chance to get their houses in order. Give them a chance to try the compression stuff. Share this guidance with them. And then start doing this.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I would even argue shortening all your meetings by 5 minutes could start now. So, like, just, that piece.
Something small.
Yeah, something small. Because your priorities are what matter.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out what they are. Compress your work with compression, delegation, or delegation to the floor. There's waste in everyone's day. Let's wring it out.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Alrighty. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Sarah. That's all this week, y'all. Thanks so much, and we'll see you back here next week with a new topic. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.